But we're talking about cherry blossoms in Oxen Run Park. I understand we have a beach in Southeast as well. Now, hey, Nathan, how are you?
Hello, good. Happy to be here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nathan is the executive director or founder of Ward 8 Woods.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so, we always call it park or woods, but what are the woods that you're working in, Nathan?
Well, in Ward 8, there's more than 500 acres of forested parkland, which actually doesn't include the DPR properties of Oxen Run Park that we were talking about. It includes mostly federal parkland. There's three major chunks of that. One of it is what they call Oxen Run Parkway, which is the forested area that's east of the city-owned area. So that starts at 13th Street and goes down to Southern Avenue in the area of United Medical Center and the Arc. And that's probably the most pristine area, forested area that we have in Ward 8. There's a beautiful upland area with a lot of oak trees and beech and mountain laurel. And then there's a rare ecosystem known as a magnolia bog. And also the remains of military installations, because that was all part of the Camp Sims military reservation. And then there's Shepherd Parkway, which is 197 acres of woods running along 295 from St. all the way down to DC Village. And then, of course, there's Fort Stanton Park on the heights above historic Anacostia. And then the fourth major area that Ward 8 Woods focuses on rejuvenating are the woods along both sides of Suitland Parkway. And those belong to the DC Department of Transportation.
I don't want to get you into trouble, but, we the folks that live in this community, observe that it is a very green area, maybe one of the greenest in the city. And a lot of it is owned by the U.S. Park Service. Yeah. And, sometimes we feel as though it's been ignored by the Park Service and allowed to end up in the state in which it had become.
Absolutely.
Before individuals like yourself got involved and the volunteers that you work with. But how did you discover these areas?
Well, I was born in DC, grew up in Rockville, Maryland, and have lived in Congress Heights since 2009. I've always been an outdoorsman, Eagle Scout, went to church camp. And so one of the things that I love about Ward 8 is that there is so much green space. When back in those days, I was attending the Congress Heights Community Association meetings where I met Philip Pennell, who's been really focused on environmental justice, along with so many other things for so long. So when he learned about what my interests were, he invited me to be chair of a committee under that neighborhood association to focus on Shepherd Parkway. And that's how I got started. I led committee to restore Shepherd Parkway since 2012. And since that time, we've been having these monthly volunteer events where we just remove hundreds of thousands of pounds of trash. But to your question about the neglect, first of all, I think it's important to remember that why our parklands are federal is the legacy of the lack of home rule. Essentially, until home rule, everything in DC was federal, and a lot of it still is. Now, in theory, that ought to bring prestige to our parks to have them be part of the national park system. But the reality on the ground has not been good. And I want to be clear, I have tremendous respect for my colleagues who work in the Park Service. They are all dedicated public servants, but they are hopelessly understaffed. And I sympathize with that because I was a teacher in Prince George's County Public Schools for 8 years. And I always felt like I was set up to fail because there was one of me and 160 students. And, I could work 80 hours a week and it would never be good enough. And I'm afraid it's the same way for my friends in National Capital Parks East, which is the unit that includes all the federal parkland on the eastern half of DC and in Prince George's County. So there's just a lack of resources in the Park Service nationwide. Even when you go to the National Mall, you see things are falling apart and not properly maintained. And that's a place that attracts millions of tourists and is integral to the economy. We layer on top of that the pattern of environmental racism, where pollution is concentrated in working class communities of color. And And you end up with the decades of neglect that we've seen. And Ward 8 Woods is really focused on trying to undo that and
Well, that's
engage residents in the process.
that's one of the things that I like about Ward 8 Woods,
Mhm.
is the fact that, you know, you along with members of the community have taken this into your own hands to clean up these woodlands, or
Mhm.
parklands, and so what is the plan? I know that I've read where now we're talking about walking paths. We're talking
Mhm.
about what's going to happen now that when we get it cleaned up. How do we get people in to really enjoy what we have over here?
Yeah. So, one way of looking at our aims is comparing the woods in Ward 8 to Rock Creek Park. Rock Creek Park has more than 30 miles of hiking trails. They're pretty well maintained. They are beloved by people who live nearby. And there's really no reason why it can't be the same way in Southeast. There are a couple of existing trails that we're working to maintain. The Fort Circle Hiker Biker Trail, which starts across from Anacostia Museum, goes through Fort Stanton, and then it actually continues through Ward 7 all the way up to Grant Street Northeast. And then there's the George Washington Carver Trail, which is in the woods behind the Anacostia Museum along the north side of Suitland Parkway. But the vast majority of the area, the parkland in Ward 8, the forested parkland, is theoretically belongs to the people. Theoretically, it's open to the public. But who's going to go walking when there's no trail, there's no map, you have to do bushwhacking, which is, I do that, but not many other people want to do that. It's uncomfortable and potentially dangerous. And so we're envisioning ultimately what could be as much as 10 miles of trail network. And the first leg that we're proposing this year would be on the north side of Suitland Parkway, about 2 miles through the woods, parallel to the parkway and the existing bike trail from Pomeroy Road on the west end to Southern Avenue on the east end. Eventually, we'd like to have a trail following that same route, but on the south side of the parkway to make like a 4-mile loop.
You know, I know our time is tight, but I'm curious. There's been a lot of construction on
Mhm.
295, and
Oh, yeah.
some of that I mean, it looks like we've lost some of the park area.
Yeah.
Not that it was used, but some of that park area. What was the balance there? Was there any conversation that
Mhm.
you all were involved in as they were negotiating the space that they needed to
Yeah.
expand 295?
So those conversations took place in before I became involved in this in 2011. The General Services Administration, which is in charge of building that new Homeland Security headquarters at St. Elizabeth West Campus, essentially told the community in Ward 8 that there were going to be, I think, 14,000 workers ultimately on that campus, and that if they did not want all of those cars on Malcolm X Avenue and Martin Luther King Avenue, they needed to rebuild the interchange to include a ramp that would lead directly from 295 onto the campus. And in order to do that, they needed to cut down 8 acres of federal parkland that was part of Shepherd Parkway. And my understanding is that most of the community leaders, when given that, two bad choices, cut down the woods or clog our neighborhood with commuter traffic, they supported the rebuilding of the interchange. The Park Service fought against it to try to keep it as parkland, but they lost because they were able to play the national security card. The General Services and Homeland Security were. So 8 acres got cut down, and I can only imagine what would have happened if they had tried to do the same thing in Rock Creek or C&O Canal or any number of other places where residents have more political and social capital to make their voices heard and taken seriously in government. So I think that's a reflection of environmental racism and bias, the fact that they thought that they could come in and do that, and they actually did. Park Service did receive some funds as mitigation for that, and some of those funds have been used as part of a concept planning process for improvements to Shepherd Parkway. But they did come out with a concept plan last December, but we've yet to see specifics on exactly what that's going to look like.
Well, we're going to stick with you to find out, how that evolves, because we know that you're going to be there at the table. And I know as a result of the loss of all that parkland, we found more, wildlife in our backyards and on our streets, which was really, really interesting. But we knew where that they too were being displaced as a result of that growth.
Yeah.
Let me ask lastly, I mean, you work with a lot of volunteers. I'm pretty sure that, your volunteer crew has probably grown from yourself and one person to, I hope, many others. But is that the case? And if there's someone watching who really wants to be a part of this, how can they volunteer with you all?
Absolutely. So our website is actually under construction right now, but you can still go to it, ward8woods.org. And you can still register for our volunteer events, which are regularly scheduled the first Saturday and the second Saturday of every month. And we were recently able to increase the capacity for each of those events to 35 people. So you can go on and sign up. We're also happy to host other groups at other times. And I can't leave without talking about our Park Steward program. This is really the heart and soul of what we do. We employ currently 4 Ward 8 residents. We seek out people who have barriers to employment, people who have been to jail, have spotty work history, who for various reasons have had trouble getting and keeping jobs. And we give them an opportunity to work in their own community, removing trash, cutting back invasive species, doing green jobs training. Right now, we're being trained on how to build and maintain trails so that we'll be ready to do that if and when we ever get permission from the city and the Park Service to put in new trails. And they work every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In fact, as soon as I get off here, I got to go load the truck and take everything to the Fort Totten dump, because we've been doing around 2,000 pounds each and every day that we work. Wow. And more than that on the days when we have volunteer groups.
Well, I personally, Nathan, I'm going to say thank you as a Ward 8 resident, and on behalf of my neighbors, we want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. One, to restore the earth as we celebrate Earth Day, but also to make our parks livable, great places to visit in our community. I thank you so very much. And as I say, always make this a place to call home if you have information you want to share about what Ward 8 Woods is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I always remind people the environment is not just about the Arctic or the Amazon or the Grand Canyon. It's where we breathe.
It looks like Nathan froze.
You can't.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay.
Spotty internet. Yeah. But just to wrap up, you can't separate the environment from all the other issues that are going on. It's understandable with everything going on in Ward 8. The environment usually isn't a focus, but at Ward 8 Woods, we're trying to use it as a tool to heal and empower people.
That's a great place to do it too. So. Again, thank you so very much, and we will stay in touch.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great weekend, and hopefully you won't get caught in the rain as you're delivering trash.
Oh, yeah.
All righty.